I feel like the belief in kind of like old school or even like unconscious forgiveness is the grudge is there, as a protection mechanism because I love myself. I keep the grudge because I love myself
Totally.
versus
Yeah.
like reorienting around that as the belief of like, because I love myself, I'm going to forgive.
Because I think where we get tripped up, especially in spiritual work, is by pushing against what it is that we're experiencing. You'll know when this is for yourself, but you will feel something shift. And that's when the emotional metabolism part of it starts to come in. Welcome to SoulPod, where science meets mysticism and your inner wisdom leads the way. I'm your guide, Crystal Cassidy, and together we will bridge the seen and the unseen, science and spirituality, the practical and the profound. From quantum physics to energy centers, near-death experiences to extraterrestrial contact, join us as we delve into the mysteries of consciousness and journey together towards a more awakened, compassionate, and soul-connected world. Find your seat, drop in, and let's go on a journey together. Welcome back, light beings, to another episode of Soul Podcast. Today, we're going to dive into a really deep, important topic, and that is forgiveness. So every single one of us has had some sort of relationship with forgiveness. And we're going to go into the science of it, the mysticism of it, the energetics of it. And I'm joined today with the SoulPod team, Kat and Linda. Welcome.
Hello.
And we'll also do a mini practice towards the end of this. I'll walk you through what is my favorite forgiveness practice, one that I have developed a relationship over the last probably 10, 15 years. That has been my go-to practice when I'm feeling those energetics starting to get to me. So I will share that with you all towards the end of today's chat. And so just to kick it off, I love for us to understand a little bit of the science before we get into the mysticism of these topics. And forgiveness, believe it or not, does have some science behind it. So we've been looking at this in different studies for many, many years, and we now know that forgiveness as a concept, as a psychological, emotional experience, can help us with all kinds of physical benefits compared to people that are holding, we can just call it, distill it down to holding a grudge, if you will. And so you can imagine, this makes a lot of sense, that if you hold a grudge, and that grudge is, the definition of a grudge is something that you haven't yet let go of. It's something that you're hung up on. And you're in the past in some component. It's very understandable. We've all been there. But there is a measurable effect that that grudge can have on your health. There's a cost to holding a grudge, and that cost can be inflammation. That's one thing that they picked up in these studies, is that those who forgave and were able to release emotionally a past hurt or wrong had decreased inflammation markers. We have a lower heart rate when we activate forgiveness, and lower blood pressure. So the autonomic nervous system looks like it is affected by the concept and experience of forgiveness. So that alone should give us some sort of direction that, like, hey, forgiveness is a good thing. We may want to activate it in our lives, and there may also be areas in our lives that we might not even be aware of that forgiveness is beckoning to us. So to start off, maybe we can talk about the definition for each of us of like, what is forgiveness and how have you developed a relationship with it over the years? And I'll pass it over to Linda to start.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Personally, I've always seen it almost self-sacrificial in a way. So I think it'll be really cool to kind of redefine that for anyone who's also in the same place where forgiveness feels sacrificial to me, and it feels like something that I always did by default because it was the right thing to do, but also kind of in a way buried my own need for anger towards, people who may have wronged me. It also, I feel like traditionally I've felt like forgiveness meant letting people in immediately, so I'm excited to dive into like that aspect of it too, and all of the different ways that forgiveness can actually not mean that at all. Yeah, personally, forgiveness is just, it's so complicated and it's so loaded, and it's something that I want to say we should all be willing and able to give, but at the same time, it's a big ask, right? What do you think, Kat? What comes up for you?
As you were introducing Crystal and you were mentioning grudges, it's so funny what came up for me because it's been such a journey for me. I don't know if it's my Scorpio moon or what, but I have had such a hard time in my life, like working with and releasing grudges. Like if I feel as though somebody has wronged me, again, I think it's that Scorpion. I'm just like, and I am like, I'm good. You are dead to me kind of thing. Like it is so difficult for me to forgive. It's been a journey in my life. And I feel like as I've been on my spiritual journey, the biggest thing I've learned is that the more I'm able to forgive, and again, we'll dive into that definition because, as you mentioned, Linda, it's so nuanced and it's such a multifaceted word and definition and concept, but the more that I've been able to forgive and what it feels like to forgive in my body, the lighter I become, and the more instead that space is filled with compassion and that space is filled with my own vitality, like being restored to me. And so I feel like the biggest thing that I've learned in that is that these grudges and like maintaining that energetic loop with somebody in the past, like reinforcing that loop with my emotional attachment, aka grudge with them. Just like the only person it's truly affecting is me. And the only person it's truly weighing down is me. And whether that looks like inflammation or these physiological markers or like a lack of clarity, a lack of light, a lack of an ability to be in joy and more so finding myself in that place of victim of like somebody did something to me. And until I've been able to truly cut that cord and allow myself to move forward, it's just a weight that pulls you down. And so it has been a journey that I'm consistently returning back to and returning back to my own definition of forgiveness, what it feels like in my body, how it interacts and dances with boundaries and my own like sovereignty and relationship. So there's so many aspects again to this multifaceted concept that we can dive into. But all in all, it is one of the biggest lessons or like skills that we're here to learn, it feels like for me.
And I mean, what we're talking about here is like the human experience, which the nature of the context of the human experience is going to be nuanced. Like what I say so much is that we each came in with our own unique energetic constitution, depending on what we wanted to learn and move through in this lifetime. And so I do think that relationships is a big part of the reason that we're here from a spiritual perspective. And so when we talk about forgiveness, it's really talking about the relationship, not just between other humans and experiences in our lives, but our relationship to time. Because, and this is where I was so blown away when I studied with Guru Singh for a while, and I continue to, but he would always start off our work together with a lot of forgiveness work, because this is almost like a different way to think about forgiveness is in this relationship with time. And we talk about giving forward to the present moment, because when we're talking about grudges, when we're talking about something that we haven't let go of from an energetic perspective, and then we can get into a conversation around energetic attachments and this relationship, it's somewhere in the past. And so for me, I imagine some of my energy being somewhere else other than the present moment. And again, this is nuanced, and I'm not talking about like condoning what somebody's done to you, or there are serious wrongs that we're talking about here, but the energy, your relationship to that experience is based in the past. And so a lot of that work is to reclaim. I really imagine forgiveness work to be reclamation of your present moment. And you can bring that energy back into your now. You mentioned sovereignty, Kat. I think that's also very tied to forgiveness, of like, this is my experience, these are my energies, and this is how I'm going to run my energy. And for me, it's a giving forward to the present moment. To your point, when I do it, I feel lighter, I feel release, I feel openness, I feel more present. And it's not to say that you can just snap your fingers when you've been wronged and do a couple breaths and like all is fixed, right? This is a journey. You're going to discover more and more about yourself and your relation to others and your relationship to the present moment and what's important to you. Because when you felt wronged by somebody or something, you're learning too. You're learning like, this is really important to me. Like, this is what I will allow for in a relationship or experience. This is what I will not allow for in a relationship or experience. And then we get into, I'm covering a lot of ground here, but then we get into like boundaries, right? And whether boundaries are spiritual, or if everything's one, then there are no need for boundaries, or even forgiveness. I know that that's a conversation to be had. And kind of in Byron Katie's work, at some level of consciousness, of experience, forgiveness isn't necessary because there wasn't anything to forgive in the first place, because we're talking about the nature of categorizing something as good or bad and not just as experience. And so that can be also a kind of tricky conversation to have. And that's where I remind everybody that truth is relative depending on your consciousness, where you're viewing an experience from. Yeah. So that could be true on one level of consciousness, and I believe it is. We're in the human experience and we're in relationship. Forgiveness is an important and helpful way to reclaim your energy and your experience. And from like a really elevated perspective, everything's connected. And so forgiveness as a concept can become a little bit harder to make tangible.
Yeah, that's a very interesting take. It's almost like bigger than what my brain can even conceptualize, the idea of like, well, why would you, like, is there a need to forgiveness if that just means defining right or wrong? But also, the human has every right to maintain their comfort, because each of our boundaries are contributing to like the evolution as a whole. You know what I mean? Each of us saying what works and what doesn't work for us. If we were to just keep quiet on it on the basis of like, well, there is no such thing as right or wrong, then how would people evolve if they aren't being invited to, by way of others being angry or sad or hurt in some way? So that's a really cool take. But I also like, I do agree with that. Like I used to have a pen pal who was like a death row inmate. And I always told people when they asked, like, do you know what he did? I was always like, no, it's not my business. It's not my job to forgive. Like, I'm here to connect. And it was always the same kind of thing. It was, well, like, who are we to define right or wrong? But obviously there are, cut and clear explanations of that. I don't know. That's such an interesting take. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, it's an extremely evolved place to exist, right? To be able to transcend our own perception of right and wrong, our own perception.
And urges.
Yeah, it's an extremely evolved place to exist. And I would say the majority of us, we aspire to be there, but the majority of us, and maybe we touch it, like every now and again.
I can say I'm not always there, for sure.
Yeah,
I still do my forgiveness practices.
Totally. Yeah, it's extremely difficult, I think, to sustain. I mean, it's a level of mastery in consciousness and mindfulness and transcendence that the majority of us were working towards, but, can't say we're there.
Yeah, I think it's nice to have that kind of in the back of your mind is like a North Star. It's much more nuanced than I encourage you not to get lost in the idea of like, what's right, what's wrong. That can be like a pretty, especially for the human mind,
Yeah.
pretty difficult to wrap your mind around. It's more like about like what's the experience, what's the growth here. And from a forgiveness perspective, it's not as much, in my experience, about the other person. It's a lot more about your experience with that energetic.
Yeah. Your willingness to carry. Yeah.
Totally, totally. So I typically don't think when I'm doing forgiveness work, I'm not thinking too much about the other person and the like details of it. I'm really focused on my feelings about it, my experience of it. And it's more about this release of that energy and holding myself through that increased awareness around that experience, if that makes sense. Because there's something to sit with when we're doing forgiveness work, which is also why it can be very difficult and crunchy. And at least in my experience, if you can sit with it a little bit beyond that crunchiness, there is this spaciousness that can come in. And like I said, this can take time, and this can take a lot of sitting with yourself and understanding, turning that light of your awareness up so that you really understand your energetics, your emotions, your experience around it. And at least for me, I let go a bit of the analysis of what happened, even though that has a place, right? Like clinical therapy and support has a place, that's understanding the mental components of your experience and especially your past. And then there's a place for really connecting to these spiritual, the awareness around that experience. And the more that you give yourself forward to this moment, allow yourself to feel the feels. And I've also discovered most of it is forgiving myself.
Yeah.
So much more of it is like, yes, releasing the energetics or the past tied to that event. I would say like 80% of it is forgiving myself and facing my own shame and my own guilt.
Yeah. And my own like part in it. Like I feel like that's like a huge part of why people struggle with forgiveness in the first place, is because holding a grudge is much easier. It's much less complicated than examining your role in the situation, examining the ways you were wrong. You know what I mean? And allowing those emotions to come up unguarded and totally honestly with yourself. It's much easier to just hold a grudge, you know?
Yeah. And I feel like I can hear like a listener who might be listening to this and can't seem to acknowledge any of their own part in it, or
Totally.
or
Yeah,
they were in a place where they were a victim. Just like there are so many situations where it feels so difficult, like you are like up against a brick wall trying to walk through it, to not only like be able to zoom out to the experience, but also orient around like the experience about you, like how it relates to you, and instead of through the lens of like what this single individual did to me. So just for that person, like how do you start to move from that place to a softer place and into kind of what we're talking about? Like this feels, because it feels like this little bit of a more advanced conversation around forgiveness. Like for someone who's just at the beginning of like, but I am so hurt, I'm so angry, this was done to me. Like how do they take the first step?
Yeah, I think, and we may have different answers for that, but my answer would be to let yourself feel. If you're in that really crunchy state and you're feeling very wronged, the best thing to do in that moment is to just sit with that, to allow that to be your experience, and to release any judgment of yourself in having that experience.
Right.
Just punch the pillows, like write it out, like dance in your living room to a really angry song and like just let it flow and validate your experience as being your experience. Because I think where we get tripped up, especially in spiritual work, is by pushing against what it is that we're experiencing. You'll know when this is for yourself, but you will feel something shift. And that's when the emotional metabolism part of it starts to come in. And then at some point it's a choice. Do you want to, are you open to letting this go?
Yeah.
And for a while, that answer, we were talking about somebody that I know that answer was no for decades.
Yeah.
But then eventually it opened up and there was this massive release. And so if we're infinite beings, then whether you forgive in this lifetime or the next lifetime, it's all good. But I do think there's some increased access to joy in your path if you can take that step when you're ready. I don't know. How do you think about it, Linda?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that forgiving for yourself should be the reason, not to forgive because, have to see your ex-husband all the time and you share custody. Like, that is a valid reason to keep your emotions in check. That's a valid reason not to allow someone back into your space, but you don't necessarily need to offer that forgiveness to that person. Really, the opportunity is that's being given is more about, can you forgive your part in it? Can you allow yourself that levity despite having those face-to-face interactions? I mean, that is like, what an incredible ascension opportunity to be able to hold true in yourself that this person will not occupy any further space, will not cause you any further anger while still being able to be face to face with them. Like, that is so powerful to be able to hold those two truths at once. But yeah, no, I love the idea, and I totally agree with you that metabolizing the emotion is going to scientifically be the first step, way more so than making sense of what happened and logically reasoning it. You have to release that pressure valve before
Yeah.
you can do anything, before it will even make sense. I think,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
anyone who's really in tune with their emotions knows the power and the clarity that comes on the other side of a big
Yeah.
cry and a big scream. And
Yeah.
we're not at all saying that this means you have to immediately go and be like, let's be best friends again. Let's come back to where we were. No, like, the dynamic has changed. If you've been required to process emotions, like, on a cellular level, you've changed. And it's more about, can you find the space in your heart to allow room, that spaciousness to exist, that freedom to exist.
Yeah.
What about you, Kat? What comes up for you?
I think one of the biggest things that I want to double hook on that you said is I feel like the belief in kind of like old school or even like unconscious forgiveness is the grudge is there, as a protection mechanism because I love myself. I keep the grudge because I love myself
Totally.
versus
Yeah.
like reorienting around that as the belief of like, because I love myself, I'm going to forgive. Because I love myself, I'm going to cut this cord. I'm going to move into this space of levity for myself, it is what we, started with before, of like, it doesn't have to do with them. And it's I think just shifting that orientation around the protection of self. It's like forgiveness is actually the way that you honor and protect yourself from
Mhm.
the continuous and like perpetual effect of the betrayal or the wrongdoing. The forgiveness is the way that you move into a place of radical self-love and reclamation. Like, that's actually the way, instead of holding on to the wrong, holding on to the grudge and the pain and the reliving of it. So I think that can be an important just like shift in the way we perceive why we're forgiving. Like, what's the point? Because to some degree, like, I feel like grudges, they feel good. We get addicted
Yeah.
to
Oh, yeah.
we get
Feels like
addicted to,
protective.
And
yeah,
then we get
exactly.
other people involved in our
Oh my
grudges.
God, yeah. Yeah.
Totally. And so I think if we can, if we have that self-awareness of like, there's a part of me that, yes, doesn't want to forgive, and become curious about like, why do I like the feeling? What about this story is fulfilling a part, like an identity that I have, or what part of this story is working for me, and getting really curious about that, what the barrier to forgiveness is.
Yeah.
And then, moving through the steps I feel like we've kind of talked about, of like zooming out and moving into some of those practices.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to offer I'm feeling called to share this example, which is even more esoteric, if we can go there. But it's tying into this spiritual concept, which comes up in so many traditions, that forgiveness is tied to liberation. And liberation of what? It's like liberation of the personality and the self into your wholeness, which is powerful and beyond measure, and pure consciousness, pure awareness, pure connection. And so if forgiveness is this pathway to liberation. And yes, also you can argue that on some level, forgiveness was never even necessary from a very evolved level. But I think for us, for most of us, like you said, Kat, accessing
We're
this,
mortals. Yeah.
for us mortals, there is practical application to some of these energetics based on where it is that you're starting from. So that's where we're kind of coming at this from. But even beyond your lifetime, this is when we come into the concept of karma. And my understanding of karma is that it's the process of balancing. It's a process of balancing energetics, and it's tied to the law of cause and effect, if you really want to go into the spirituality of this. And so you can think of this even at a higher level. And I'll give you an example from my own life of somebody that I had a relationship with. And I knew from my spiritual work that we had had a karmic relationship. It wasn't the first time I had been in relationship with this person. And in one lifetime, that person had been the perpetrator and I was the victim. In
Yep.
another lifetime, I was the perpetrator and they were the victim.
Yeah.
And this was the third lifetime. And the question was, were we going to balance these energies in this lifetime?
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of my personal, pat myself on the back moments, because I really believe that because of my awareness of those energetics, I was able to. We were in a very dynamic relationship. I was very wronged. They were very, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then it came to a point to where I was like, I think this energetic is done. And it required a lot of forgiveness work, and it required getting to a point to where there was no activation in my body in relation to that experience. That's when I knew that we were complete and had been balanced. There's no activation in my system around that experience, which was a pretty big one for me in my life. So I just want to offer that up as like an example of beyond lifetime energy balancing, which I think this idea of forgiveness and compassion and liberation all gets tied to.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful.
What do you think it does for the collective when people choose to forgive and to release?
Oh my gosh, we need so much of it. Well, I think the ego loves hierarchy,
Yeah.
right? So it wants to, and actually, and we a lot of times think of ego as being an overactivation of self. It's also an underactivation or a victimization of self. It wants to be in relationship to something else. And so when we move beyond the ego and the soul takes the front seat, then we have just an easier access to compassion. It doesn't mean you're like perfect all the time. It just means that you're aware of that heart-based relationship with others. If we could access more of that in our collective and how we relate to one another, and letting go of a little bit of judgment of ourselves and others, I think we would create this spaciousness that just gives people more room to grow and to change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a practice that somebody shared with me, years ago, but it feels timely to share. It's a practice called Just Like Me. And so essentially when you find yourself judging somebody or, persecuting somebody for doing something that you judge as wrong, like they cut me off in traffic, just like I've done. You like add that to the end to remind yourself,
I love that.
where they, were talking bad about me, just like I've done, just like me, just basically to remember, what's the word? Expose the ego in its attempt to create this hierarchical structure of I've never done that, pedestalizing yourself,
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
placing yourself in this righteous, they're doing that, I've never done that.
Righteousness. Ooh,
Right.
yeah.
Instead of they're also human, they're also doing the best they can. I've also wronged. I've also cut someone off in traffic. I've also lied, done the thing. I've also done things. So it was an interesting practice that I still find myself kind of doing, especially in those little moments where it can be so easy to slip into that hierarchical place of righteousness of I would never do that,
Yeah.
And it's no, I have, and I probably did last week,
Yeah.
So it's just a good practice to have in your back pocket to kind of bring you back down to we're all in a place, we're all human, we're all making mistakes, we're all doing the best we can.
Yeah. I love that.
I love that. Yeah, that's, I think, such an important reminder.
Yeah.
Like, this is the Earth School. Like, we didn't come here because we wanted to have this perfected experience. We narrowed our energy down in order to have this interaction with separation.
Mhm.
And how much of our wholeness can we remember and
Mhm.
activate? And so, of course, along that process, and I really love that we're talking about this, because I think sometimes this idea of perfectionism can, especially for us Virgos, can be
Yeah.
very alluring in the spiritual development process. And, the holier than thou, the
Yeah.
righteousness
The
and
judgment.
judgment. And again, so much of forgiveness work, the more I do it, the more I realize, oh, I'm forgiving my righteousness. I'm forgiving that time that I felt like I failed myself. And sometimes that doesn't involve any other person. It's about me and my relationship to me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just giving yourself some space and dialing down that judgment for yourself will give you the capacity, I think, to dial down the judgment about others. It's so
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah.
Just a quick moment to say SoulPod is a bootstrapped, female founded company built with a whole lot of love for people like you. And we just launched a new feature called Portals, bite sized journeys like the beginner's portal, the integration portal for when you're moving through big changes in your life and your spiritual development, and even soulscapes with a timer to soundtrack your solo time. You can find the link in your show notes. And if you're vibing with this episode, follow the pod so more light beings can find us. So maybe we can talk a little bit about quantum. We love the quantum. And this kind of ties into what I was saying before about this relationship that seems to come up when you get into forgiveness work, which is the relationship with time. And if we have, I harp on this, but I think it's really important, quantum states sustained in the brain, in our microtubules, that means that consciousness is likely on some level a field experience. And so if we have this nonlinear experience, which most of us that have been doing this work come to realize, then you can start to think about what you're entangling with. Are you entangling with, as you get deeper into your spiritual journey, from guidance, your guides, past loved ones, your past self, your future self, your past lives, which are really simultaneous lives? There's all of this information and experience, the Akashic records, the astral body, that you can entangle with in the quantum field or experience, whatever label you want to put on that. So, with that context, forgiveness can be really interesting because you can think of yourself as entangling with the information of your past, especially from like a mental standpoint, that you're thinking about these thoughts and the grudge, whatever it is, the activation that comes from that experience. And so it's just another way for you to think about how you're running your energy. And again, no judgment here. It's the awareness alone starts to transform your experience. That's another thing when people come to me and they're like, I am dealing with a lot of resentment. They're like, how do I move through this resentment? And my answer is always, you already are, because you're aware of the fact that you're resentful. It's already being transformed. So like this idea that you have to do all this work, I mean, yes, and you'd be surprised at how much work you're already doing by just becoming aware of how you're running your energy. And then you can start to choose. You can start to choose and you can release that entanglement with past information. And I don't know if you all have noticed this, but when I have had big forgiveness related energetic releases, something new has come into my life, like almost immediately.
Yeah.
That's like, why would you do this work? That's one of the big answers, I think, is that it clears out because you're no longer entangled with this information. You're opening your capacity up to become entangled with something new. And that, I think, is I don't know if you want to call that practical, but it's, I think, one of the biggest benefits to doing this work.
Yeah, that's such a thing. It's like when right before a wave crashes, how the water pulls back for a second. That's always how it goes. And I feel like everyone has their own unique version of that. Like for me, it's when I set boundaries, something always comes through on the other side because my boundaries have been historically very weak. And yeah, forgiveness is definitely a common theme that I've noticed too, where when people can finally, because it is like it's blocking your aura in such a huge way to harbor resentment, whether it's you're angry at something that happened on the way to work with a stranger, or you're angry at something your sister did like 12 years ago, or, whatever. It does take up space, you know what I mean? And the moment that you not force yourself and spiritual bypass yourself your way into releasing, the moment you actually can release it and actually can come to terms with it and decide what your next step is, whether that's, setting a boundary, completely allowing them back into your life, whatever it is, the moment that happens, it does open up space energetically for something to connect with you. And a lot of times it's a desire you've been wanting that is waiting to connect. Yeah, it's so fascinating how that works.
Yeah, I feel like as we're talking more and more about forgiveness, I've been reflecting and I'm like, wow, this has actually been a huge forgiveness week for me. Like, there
Cool.
was the clear experience recently, but then even in the last like 7 days, I'm like, oh my gosh. And I wanted to share this practice because it feels like exactly what we're talking about. So I realized, I'd been harboring a lot of resentment towards my now husband, which is still a crazy word to say, but my now husband.
Cat's married.
I got married. But I had all this resentment from just a few little things that happened. And so I took it into meditation and I really got clear on what exactly the like overarching transgressions were that I felt. For example, like I felt abandoned and then I felt disregarded. Like I got clear on the 3 different words that I felt were like, this is why I feel wronged. This is why I feel like you owe me an apology. Like, this is what the root is. This is the word. And then once I got clear on the word, I asked myself, I was like, do I truly believe that my husband, you can insert any person here, that this person wanted to make me feel like this? Do I truly believe that this person's intention was to abandon me or was to, disregard me? Do I truly believe that? And then holding space for what the answer is. Like in this case, no, I don't truly believe that that was their intention. And so then I was able to move forward from that place of like, yes, there's a standard of relating in any of our relationships. There's a standard of like feeling regarded, feeling like not abandoning. Like there's a standard. And where can I self-source those things within myself? Like where am I looking for this other person to be the only source for like belonging or, feeling regarded? Like where am I not giving myself those things? And then that's where the self-forgiveness came in of like, where have I been outsourcing when I should be able to give those things to myself, when I should be able to source safety no matter the external situation. And it just made forgiveness feel so much easier and became so clear as to how the two of us, and again, husband and wife, partners, siblings, like friendships, whatever the dynamic is, whatever the relational dynamic is, like we are here as beacons and guideposts to help each other evolve. And so each of these moments of, feeling disappointment or feeling like I have to do this work and then bring it up to each other is an opportunity to create another guidepost, to draw each other forward, to evolve together. And that's what we signed up for. That's what we signed up for in this, choosing of each other, of this, and on a higher level, in our souls choosing each other to interact as friends, to interact as coworkers, no matter what the time parameter is that you're meant to interact with each other. Like that is what the agreement is when you come into relationship with anybody on earth in the human body, is to act as a beacon and like invitation to evolve. And that's what you are to each other. And so if you're signing up for that, which we all are, and being in a human body, then forgiveness is a part of it. Like forgiveness is a part of the equation. Like he's going to mess up, I'm going to mess up. Like it's a part of the formula of evolution. So I can either resist forgiveness and be upset with the fact that I have to forgive, or I can get really good at this process of illuminating what, that exact process that I just shared, or I can get really good at this process and fall in love with the opportunity to forgive, expand, and evolve together. Again, there's friends, coworkers, like, it doesn't matter. I can choose to, again, resist forgiveness or be so grateful that I get to like explore and evolve together.
Yeah.
Anyway, I felt called to share that.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it all
Love it.
when it comes to like human to human dynamic, it's like getting clear on where you might be outsourcing your power in these kind of things is important, but also like what would it take for you to forgive? Genuinely, are there things that you can ask that other person for that would help you get there? Because we are all, like
Right.
Crystal always says, we are in that earth school together. And anyone who cares about the relationship wants to know how they can support in that way. And so
Right.
if forgiveness for you feels like it does have some level of condition to it, why not allow yourself to communicate that? That's one of the bravest things
Right.
you can do is communicate that, because that alone is just as vulnerable as cutting them off and walking away and
Right.
maintaining like that hard boundary. Like it takes a lot more courage to be fully vulnerable about your needs than it does to walk away from something, in my
Mm.
opinion.
And that's where
They're
it's like
important, but
getting clear on the standard and being okay with like there is a standard at which I relate with people. Like there's a
yeah,
standard at which I choose to expose my
yeah,
energy to.
to
There's
engage.
a standard of dynamic,
Mhm.
right? And if we're as a like unit unable or unwilling to get there together to a place where this feels healthy, to a place where this like meets that standard of relating, then that's a different. Forgiveness is still there, but remaining in contact, remaining in communion isn't
Mhm.
necessarily the best way to move forward, but
Yeah.
forgiveness is still the foundation of that crossroads.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's forgiveness and restoration are not the same thing.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They're different experiences. Forgiveness is all about your experience
Ooh, I
and
love that.
the energy of the experience and how you want to move through it.
Yeah.
Restoration is what comes next from your evolved place, your new place.
Yeah.
And I think that you'll know what restoration, and restoration doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's back in your life, and restoration in the context of some way that you abandoned yourself in the past that you haven't forgiven yourself for could be how it is that you're now going to show up in similar circumstances is going to be different. It's going to be coming from a new energy. And to your point, Linda, like you've changed. Once you
Mhm.
forgive, you have changed your energy.
Mhm.
And so, what comes next, if you're in your heart space, that will become clear to you of what's aligned with you now. And that can be all kinds of different restorative elements. That can be that that person's no longer in your life. You're not prioritizing that relationship.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes we think that being spiritually evolved means that we allow everything in. I don't think that. I think spiritual evolution means that you're very clear on what you're calling into your life.
Mhm.
And if a circumstance, which you've learned greatly from, so I think I also we talk a lot about curiosity and gratitude. I'm very grateful for a lot of those experiences where I've had to run forgiveness through my system. And you learn, like you're saying, Kat, like you learn how do I want to spend my day? Like Taylor Swift has said, your
Yes.
energy is a luxury item.
Yes.
So are these relationships, and this is like a sacral energy center. I think a lot of sacral energy centers, Sovereign Journey and SoulPod is a lot around this work, which is establishing this relationship with one and other, the masculine, the feminine, you, other. Like it's about that relationship. And something will emerge from that work where you know how it is that you want to run your energy. And it's just the same concept of like peace isn't passive. It comes from aligned heart-based action.
Mhm.
And that's where these worlds of like doing and being intersect. We're like human beings. And in this space and time, we have the amazing opportunity to create. And so it's always a choice. What are you creating? And that
Mhm.
goes out to your relationships as well. But you will always handle that situation of restoration from a very beautiful place when you've done the forgiveness work and you're in your heart space. Like, who knows what that is for you, but you'll feel it. And to not feel bad about the fact that you're like, that's not an energetic that I'm now calling into my life.
Yeah.
Because every single moment is a reclamation. What am I calling in now? What am I calling in now? What am I relating to now? And so give yourself the permission to live anew in every present moment, because that's the forgiveness element. We've released that entanglement. Now what? What are you creating now?
Yeah, we mentioned that I think yesterday when we were talking, just how like forgiveness, and if you're in this work, it might be easy for people in your life to weaponize or leverage that against you. Like leverage, well, don't you meditate? Shouldn't you be able to find compassion? Similar to what you said, Crystal, forgiveness and compassion are not the same as restoration. They're not the same. Like, so again, giving yourself permission to be so grounded in your knowing of what is aligned for you, what is right for you. Just notice if there's any need to people please, or if there's any shame around that, and work with that, but just double down on that clarity.
Yeah.
I love that. Ooh, such a good journey today, y'all. And so I'll share this forgiveness practice. Take it if it works for you, leave it if it doesn't. But there's two things that I would mention before we do it. One, you're going to be calling up a specific situation, so you can start to percolate on what that is now. And it's going to feel a little crunchy to start, so just know that. And if you're open to doing this, ask for a little bit of willingness in your inner experience to engage in this forgiveness exercise. And again, you don't have to do it right now. It's an invitation. And the other element I'll mention before we get into it is I'm going to guide you through, it's kind of like energetic distancing. It's along the lines of the reclamation of your now. And so when I guide you to kind of release, and you'll know what I mean in a moment, this person or situation, sometimes people can get a little hung up on that. And they're like, ooh, does that mean this person's leaving me for forever? Am I cutting them off forever? And think of it more as a reclamation. This is about the energetics. And yes, sometimes this work, especially if you do it often, other people can feel it, but that's not why we're doing this. It's really a reclamation exercise. And so let's give it a try. So find a seat and close your eyes. Take a deep breath in through your nose and a soft release through your mouth. Taking a moment here to notice how you're breathing, notice how you're feeling in your body. And calling all of your energy back to you now in this space and this time. Deep breath in through your nose. And soft release through your mouth. And affirming to yourself that you are safe. You are safe. Safe to experience, safe in your body, safe in this practice, safe in this now. Safe to be exactly who you are. Safe to be your authentic self. Safe to be who you have been. Safe to be who you are becoming. Deep breath in through your nose. Soft release through your mouth. And safe to receive. And I invite you to bring your awareness to your heart space, in your chest, your upper back. Simply becoming aware and sensing the space around this space. Noticing the vertebrae in your spine associated with your heart space. And inviting this energy center to open just a little bit more, running a little bit more energy, more capacity to receive, more capacity to love, to hold compassion for yourself and others. And from this heart-led space, I invite you to imagine and conjure in your mind's eye a situation or a person, a relationship or a time in your life where you were disappointed, you were let down, you were abandoned, betrayed. And simply conjure this image floating in front of you, knowing that you are completely safe to experience this. Imagine this person floating in front of you. A safe distance, but not too far. Their energy. And allowing yourself to feel any emotions that come up without any judgment. Taking note of them. Noticing where they live in your body, your mind. Where they live in time and space. And with this situation, this relationship floating in front of you, noticing that there's a cord of light between you and it or them. Wherever it originates in your body or your energy, noticing where that is. And noticing wherever it originates or lands in their body or in that time and space. Just noticing that energy, that entanglement, that connection from where you are now and where you were then. And then repeat after me in your mind. I forgive all things I've done to you in this life and past. I forgive all things you've done to me in this life and past. And most of all, I forgive myself. I forgive all things I've done to you in this life and past. I forgive all things you've done to me in this life and past. And most of all, I forgive myself. Deep breath in through your nose, soft release through your mouth. And then imagining this light, this cord, this entanglement between you start to burn out from the middle. Your energy coming back to you, and their energy going back to them or to that time and space until there's no more entanglement or connection. And all of your energy is back with you in this time, in this space. And then noticing them floating off further and further and further into the distance, past the point to where you can perceive them, until you no longer sense in your experience that presence, that energy, only your presence and your energy. See what that feels like in your mind, your body, your spirit. Softening your heart space, putting one hand on your heart. And most of all, I forgive myself. And most of all, I forgive myself. And most of all, I forgive myself. Calling all of your energy back to you across all space, all time, all relationships, all situations. Filling yourself with light, love, compassion, appreciation. And when you feel complete, you can open your eyes and come back into your space.
That was lovely.
Yeah, thank you.
A little extra bonus this week for y'all. Let us know how that landed in your experience. And you can find more in SoulPod. But before we close, and there's no pressure to share, but did anything come up for you all in that exercise?
I mean, for me, there was like a few different like incidences. It was kind of like a rapid flash of experiences with people. But it was mainly, I think, a grounding back into my body, which I was very much needing with like the bug issues and the things that are happening right now. Just returning to here and kind of remembering that, like, yeah, that I'm in control of my own energy, I think was really where it served me the most, which is super cool. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that resonates. I feel like for me, it's a very specific incident that I'm working with or energetic that I'm working with right now that I shared with the team yesterday. And so I feel like what was interesting is that similar to what you shared earlier in the podcast, Crystal, I didn't feel anything like when we were attached. I'm like, there isn't any charge left. Like, and the cord was rooted into my, like, first it kind of started at the heart, and then it more so was rooted into my solar plexus, which, for me is, I know is one of the reasons the energetic is so difficult between us, like because there's so much energy in my solar plexus. And anyway, so it was profound in that way for me to, I think, kind of feel and remember and know in my body, like for certain, there isn't any charge left. Like the forgiveness has been done. Like the work there has been done. It's more about, I think for me, more the work now is like the rebuilding. Whether that's what I want, whether that's what's right for, those
Restoration.
questions that
The
come in.
restoration, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The restoration, like what getting really clear on what that looks like for me. But it feels so good to know, because I feel like I've been saying that for so long, like I've forgiven, but to really feel like there's actually no charge left.
Yeah.
So that feels like a huge just breakthrough in that
High
way.
five moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool.
I
Yeah.
love that.
And for those of you listening, this practice especially is really good to do as much as you need to. Like at some points I was doing it multiple times a day, getting a little bit more spaciousness each time. And it's best used with a very specific person or situation to really allow yourself to feel into that energetic. And that can also be daunting, right? So you might need to spend some time simply sitting with the incident or the person, knowing that you're safe. So there's a lot of steps here, but that's a really abbreviated version that I hope you find helpful. And thank you, Kat and Linda, for chatting with me today about forgiveness. And we will see you next time. Like and subscribe so that we can reach more light beings that want to engage in this journey with us. And have a beautiful day.
Thank you for journeying with us today, Light Being. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and before you go, we'd love to offer you even more spiritual guidance and daily rituals. This week, we launched the biggest update since SoulPod first hit the App Store. To celebrate, we're offering you a free month of SoulPod with the code Step Into the Portal. Your SoulPod home has been completely reimagined with even more ease, more rhythm, and more room to grow. Now you can revisit past journeys, save your favorite rituals, and build personalized playlists that move with your energy. And at the heart of it all, portals. Portals are guided mini journeys, flexible, soulful spaces designed to meet you right where you are. Beginners welcomes you into the heart of soulfulness, no experience needed. Soulscapes offers looping soundscapes for solo self-guided practice. And Integration holds you gently after transformation, offering grounding and expansion. Download the app or tap the link in our show notes to begin. We'll see you inside.